Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the chapter goals for leadership teams. So this is part of a series of 4 webinars that we do specifically for leadership teams in BNI Connect. Yesterday, we talked about various leadership team tools and reports. So we kind of took a deep dive into how to enter POMS reports and how to assign speakers and what types of reports are available in the system. Today, we're going to talk about chapter goals and how you can enter your goals into BNI Connect, and it will follow along with you throughout your 6 or 12-month term. When we get back next week, we're going to be talking about the chapter web pages and how you can go in and customize your chapter web page to really make it your own. We're going to be doing that next Wednesday. And then to round out the series next Thursday, we're going to talk about the online renewal process, both from a member's perspective and also from a leadership team perspective, how to go in and to approve those online renewals as well. So before we get started with today's session, just a couple of quick housekeeping tips. First of all, if you're listening here today, Wednesday, December 7th, 2016, you are taking part in a live webinar. So that means that you are welcome to ask questions as we're going through the material today. I'll see those questions pop up on my screen and I can answer them as we're going through everything today. If you are listening to this via recording, as we do record all of our sessions and post them on YouTube as well as on our support site, feel free to send your questions in later via support ticket or at support@bniconnect.com. Again, that's support@bniconnect.com. If you have some policy questions, you want to talk to headquarters, that goes to support@bni.com. If you have technical questions about BNI Connect, support@bniconnect.com. As I mentioned, we do record all these webinars. We'll make them available at youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, as well as on the support site by clicking the question mark in BNI Connect. We do try to keep most of these webinars, with the exception of yesterday's webinar, to about 30 minutes for the content. We like to be as respectful as we can of all of your very, very busy lives and schedules, and making sure that you have enough time to put into practice what we're learning about, not just spending all day learning about it. So that said, we, and myself especially, I will stay on these webinars until every single question is answered. So feel free. I am not limited to 30 minutes. This is what I do all day, every day. I teach people about BNI Connect and talk about BNI Connect, so feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like to about this topic today, or if we have time at the end, I'm happy to answer any question about BNI Connect that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started again with today's session. By the way, if you look in the GoToWebinar software, that little kind of fold out that happens, there is a handout with today's session that you're welcome to use. It is 2017 chapter goals blank is what it is. It's an Excel file. What a lot of people find helpful is that when we're talking about the chapter goals, and again, we're going to go into depth with this in just a second, some people find it really helpful that rather than sit there and try to enter stuff directly into BNI Connect, they enter it either by hand, pen and paper onto that spreadsheet, or enter it in an offline fashion so they can sit and have a discussion about all of the goals at a leadership team meeting. Then one person goes back and enters them all into BNI Connect. So that's what that handout is, or again, if you are listening to this via recording, feel free to email us, support@bniconnect.com, and say, hey, can you send me the spreadsheet? I will be happy to do that. So the goals in BNI Connect. So to get to all this other functionality in BNI Connect, we do have to go to the scary places beyond the home screen in the system. So to do that, we're going to utilize these menus up here along the top. And you see we have network, operations, reports, tools, and admin. Now the place that we're going to go for this is the operations menu. Now the way I always remember that, operations is where you go to do data entry type stuff. And since we're going to be entering our goals, we're going to go to operations. Reports, on the other hand, are read only, so we'll just get information back out of there later. But for now, we're going to go to the operations menu. This is a chapter level function if you happen to be a director consultant. So once we get to the operations menu, we will see a couple of different options. We have managing visitors and meeting management, but what we want to get to is down the fourth option down. You'll see it says manage goals. And the goals setting program is under this menu item. You'll see that we have two different options here. We have the option to enter chapter goals, and we have the option to view chapter goals. Now, if you are not on the leadership team, if you're not the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, or a director consultant, you may only see view chapter goals. And that's because everybody in the chapter, generally speaking, the default permissions are that everybody in the chapter can kind of follow along with the chapter goals throughout the year. However, you do have to be on the leadership team in order to actually enter the goals into the system. So if you aren't seeing the enter chapter goals, don't panic. Just talk to your regional office, your executive director, your director consultant, and they should be able to help you out with that particular issue. All right, so if we want to go in and enter our chapter goals, though, the first thing we're going to do is click on Enter Chapter Goals. And this will bring up a screen. So you have a couple of things that you'll see here. The first is that it's going to ask you to choose a date range. Now, by default, it's going to assume that you've already entered your goals for this next 6-month period, because the periods in BNI are always from October to April, then April to October. So those are the two kind of 6-month halves of the year that we track in BNI. However, you are not limited to only choosing 6 months from now. You can actually choose any 6-month date range you'd like to work with. And we just choose 6-month date ranges, again, partially because that's the period in BNI, and that's about how much we can fit on the screen as well. So if you'd like to, you can go back to the start of this 6-month period, which would be October, or if you just wanted to start in December, you could do that as well, whatever you would like to do. Pick a 6-month period to work with. The next thing, and you only have to do this next part once, but you do need to come up with both a long-term vision and a mission statement for your chapter. This is kind of the yay, rah, rah portion of setting your chapter goals. Now, the long-term vision is really, it's kind of the, if I'm looking at the road, our path ahead of us, this is kind of where I want to get to eventually. So when I look at the long-term vision, there are different techniques to doing this. But when I look at the long-term vision, I'm looking at this more from a perspective, not so much a numerical perspective, but more of a, the feeling of success that we're going to have when we achieve that. So what I've done for my BNI Burr chapter up in Antarctica is that we've decided that we as a chapter want to grow the chapter to be the largest chapter in the entire continent. In addition, we want to be the #1 chapter in closed business and referrals within a 200-mile radius. So that's kind of our BHAG as a chapter, our big, hairy, audacious goal, our long-term vision for what we'd like to accomplish. Now, the second thing that you need to establish for your chapter is going to be your mission statement. So if the long-term vision is kind of, where do I want to get to? The mission statement is kind of, what are your guiding principles for how you're going to get there, right? So the mission statement for this chapter, what we've put in is that our mission statement is to help members increase their business through a structured, positive, and professional word-of-mouth program that enables them to develop long-term, meaningful relationships with quality business professionals. Okay, so now that we've established our long-term vision and mission statement, and again, you only need to do this part once. So you can see I already have this filled out. The next thing I'm going to do is make sure I have my starting date chosen. I'm going to choose to do the next 6 months, starting with this month. And then I can click Go. What it's going to do now is it's going to create a spreadsheet for me. And this spreadsheet was what we're going to fill out to track our goals throughout the next 6 months. Now, before we get into all of these different things, there is one thing that you're going to have to choose before you even get started. And that's really, how do you want to enter your goals into the system? what we're essentially asking you is, do you want to put in a big number or a small number? So do you want to look at this as a holistic for the whole chapter goal that we're setting each month? Or do you want to put these in as more per member goals, and then we'll calculate out what it would be for the whole chapter? Now keep in mind is if you put in per member goals, the way that we're going to calculate it is by all of a lot of the per member based goals, such as number of referrals and one-to-ones and things like that. What we're going to do is to multiply that by your target number of members, not your actual number of members. So that's a very important distinction. I will tell you that almost all of the people that utilize this goals program in BNI Connect just leave it as for the whole chapter goals. All right, that being said, you can choose whichever you'd like. The one thing that you cannot do is switch back and forth. So you do have to choose one and stick with it throughout the entire goals program. If you do switch it to the other one, the numbers will end up getting messed up. So what we can see here is we have our dates. So we have 6-month period. We're looking at December right now through May. And then for each month, what we need to do is to establish the goals for what we call our chapter success drivers. And the different chapter success drivers that we have here are attendance percentage, total number of one-to-ones, CEUs, visitors, new memberships, number of members in chapter, number of referrals, and finally, thank you for closed business. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually come up with the numbers for each one of those goals, because as we know, SMART goals need to be measurable. So we're going to actually put these numbers in. Now the second thing that we're going to do is you'll notice that there's the goal number that we're going to put in for each one of these, but there's also another field in there, actually another 2 fields called mechanisms. What the mechanisms are the ways in which we as a leadership team can support our goals. So what I found, or not what I found, what people have found throughout the years, and the reason for the mechanisms is that, I don't think anybody on this call, with the exception of one executive director that I see here from Vermont, is BNI their full-time job. We're all doing these positions in BNI, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and even to some extent director consultant, really as kind of a volunteer position in our spare time outside of our regular businesses. And what that means is that we only have so many hours a week that we've dedicated to doing this function. So there's a lot of times when we have let's say an initiative that we want to do with our chapter. Let's say that it's a Visitors Day, and we really know we want to do a Visitors Day sometime in the spring so that it's taking advantage of the member extravaganza period and things like that. So we know that we really need to start setting that up about 6 weeks in advance. So we go to our meeting and it's a couple of months before when we want to do our Visitors Day, and we're all prepared to announce to the chapter, hey, let's get ready to do our Visitors Day. And one thing leads to another, and for whatever reason we forget to announce it. So we realize that like a day later, and what we do is we say, oh, you know what, we'll just announce it at the next meeting. So a whole week goes by, and then all of a sudden, we get distracted again and we forget to do it. And then another week goes by and another week goes by, and all of a sudden we realize that a month has gone by, or even 6 months have gone by, and we haven't done the things that we wanted to do. That's the reason for the mechanisms, is it's put in there really as kind of a reminder to you so that you can go back and say, hey, you know what, we wanted to get to this goal, and we thought it would be a good idea to do this. And this can help keep you on track on a month-to-month basis on different initiatives that you'd like to do with your chapter. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So let's take a look at some of these specific goals and try to come up with some numbers. All right, so the first one here is really the easiest one, the attendance percentage for the chapter. So the way that I look at these goals is I do always like to kind of start with the month that we're in our 6-month period, or even a month back, because it's really easy to know kind of where we are right now. So for example, I know that the BNI Burr chapter, yeah, we have a little bit of an attendance problem with some of our members. They don't like to leave their igloos. So I know that we're struggling right now at about an 85% attendance percentage. And I know that by the end of this 6-month period, we'd really like to get to 95%. So this part of it is fairly straightforward. We know where we are right now, and we also know where we want to get to. Now comes kind of the easier part. We can figure out how much do we need to increment each month in order to get to our end result. So I always like to, as they say, begin with the end in mind. So I know if I want to get up 10 percentage points, that's going to be quite conveniently 2 percentage points a month. So 87, 89, 91, 93, and 95. So we can gradually increase over the course of that 6-month period. Now, before I get any pushback, that is a very simplified approach to doing this. I 100% completely realize that. And I do also understand that there are other things that might get in the way of it just being a linear growth like that. For example, at least here in Rhode Island, where I'm from, the next 2 months, especially this month, is gotta be a tough month. We have a lot of holidays coming up. We have New Year's, we have Christmas, we have Hanukkah, we have all of these different things that may interfere with attendance. In the summer, I happen to live in a more of a beach touristy community here, so we tend to have some attendance problems in the summer. So I realize that things may ebb and flow a little bit. My opinion on the matter is, yes, you can absolutely look at this on a month-by-month, goal for each one of these success drivers and really fine-tune it to include those things. I would say your first pass, just get something in there. What I would hate to see is that you overcomplicate it to the point that nothing gets done. It's better to have something in there and then go back and tweak it later than to have nothing in there because you get caught in the minutia. Now, brings up a good point. You can always go back and edit your goals. This isn't, the IRS or anything like that. You are welcome to go back and change them if they're too high or if they're too low. You can amend them. You can make adjustments. All right, so we've come up with our attendance percentage. We're going to go up by 10% over the next 6 months. Now, mechanisms. What are going to be those things that we can do to really promote our goals over that 6 months? So, one thing that we can do, let's say in December still, is we're going to announce our goal, right? So that would be a great thing to do. So we can tell our chapter, hey guys, we have a goal in the next 6 months to get to this level and get them on board with it. Let's see, Susan has a question real quick. She says, where do we find our current percentage? So you can do that a couple of different ways. You can find that either by looking at your PALMS report, the summary PALMS report for the last, let's say, 6 months, or on a week-by-week basis, really any time period you want to. There are a lot of regions that also use what's called the power of one report, or the member traffic lights, which you could take an average of your members' percentages. There's also a chapter traffic lights. So if you look under the reports section, so under reports chapter, I'm going to open this up in a new window real quick. There should be a chapter traffic lights, which will give you it actually gives you the opposite report, the absenteeism report. So again, this is my fake region, so you have to take that with a grain of salt, but I can see that my absenteeism for the Burr chapter is actually at 2.46, which means that we have about a 97% attendance rate. Okay, so does that help, Susan? All right, awesome. So going back to the goals, we can, again, each month you can put in 1 or 2 goals per, or 1 or 2 mechanisms per particular success driver. And you can scale those up. So let's say that, we announce our goal here in December. In January, we're going to make sure that our, VP is sending accountability letters. Right? So we can follow up with that. Now, you can fill out as many of these as you'd like. If you're struggling with, I don't really know what to do, there is this button up here. It says Chapter Goal Guide. If you click on that, that'll give you some suggestions. By no means whatsoever is this an exhaustive list. There are hundreds and hundreds of different things that you can do. This is just to kind of get the creative juices flowing, but you can also, copy and paste. So let's say that we have the implement the mentoring program. Great way to increase attendance. I can just take that and I can say that, that's going to be a second initiative here in January. We're going to implement the mentoring program. So you can put in as many of these mechanisms as you want to in order to stay on track with your initiatives. So let's see, Karen has a question. Karen says, we're a new chapter and understand the traffic lights will not show up for us for a while. That is correct, Karen. It takes a full year really for the traffic lights to be 100% accurate because certain things like retention just can't be calculated for about a year. So you may need to rely on going to the summary POMS report and doing a manual calculation. Although the absenteeism should be that's based on number of members per week. So as long as you've been a chapter for a couple of months, that should be fairly accurate so far. Jenny says, what about the individual traffic lights? So the individual traffic lights are not in BNI Connect. Those are produced on a regional level. For those of regions that are participating in it, they do that manually with an Excel spreadsheet. So that's something that you really need to talk to your executive director or your director consultant about that one. Sorry about that, Jenny. James has a question. He says, what is meant by play the BNI game? So you'll see in the chapter goal guide that there's one almost under every single one of them. It says, play the BNI game. So the BNI game is a really fun chapter experience. And what it is you split the chapter into teams, usually 3 or 4 teams, or even more than that, depending on the size of your chapter, and you basically compete against each other. It's kind of like the BNI Olympics, if you will. And you assign point values for each one of the different, different good things in the chapter. So let's say that, having a one-to-one is 5 points. And, bringing in outside referral, maybe that's 10 points. And you know what? If you bring a visitor, let's say that's 25 points. So you get the chapter, competing with the groups, with each different group in order to, increase activity levels in the chapter. And the nice thing is that you can really, play with the point values even. Let's say that, one of the, things that you're struggling with is attendance. Well, you make that a higher point value in order to encourage that activity. Now, some chapters also do negatives. If you're absent without a sub, it's negative 10 points. I personally, I am a big believer in the BNI philosophies, and one of those is positive and supportive. So I choose to just put in plus values as opposed to negatives. All right, so Susan also says, make sure that you click the save button every once in a while. Absolutely. There is a 30-minute timeout in BNI Connect. So at least once every half hour, make sure that you're clicking the save button. All right, so we only have about 6 minutes left, so I want to try to get through some of these other goals real quick. A couple of strategies for the rest of these goals. I actually like to skip now. I skip all the way down to number of members in the chapter. This is probably the next key goal that you want to do because it will actually drive a lot of the rest of your numbers. So what you want to look at here, again, I know where we are now. So we are at 30 members right now in our chapter. And I want to grow by, let's say, 1/3. So I'm going to go up to 40 members. Again, conveniently, that's a nice linear growth of about 2 members per month in order to get there, and what are some mechanisms that we can use to grow the chapter. So let's say again, well, we can go back out to, let's say, March and April. I know in April we want to do a Visitors Day, which means that in February and March we need to be announcing the Visitors Day and working on the Visitors Day. Right, and there's tons of other things that you can do as well to support that number of members in the chapter. All right, now, again, you can complement this as well, or complicate it, I should say, by also, when you do your Visitors Day, you know that you're going to jump up by a bigger number at that point. So, but again, I like to keep things simple, at least on the first pass. But now that we know the number of members, we can now move on to new memberships, because if we know the number of members and how many people we have now, we know how many members we need to bring in each month, right? So if we're going to be growing by 2 members each month, then we need to make sure that we're bringing in 2 new members each month, right? Well, sort of. The thing that you do want to keep in mind here as well is that we do have an attrition factor in BNI, and that is that some people just they leave BNI. None of our chapters out there have a perfect 100% retention rate, and we probably don't necessarily want a 100% retention rate. Some people even leave for good reasons. They get too busy, or they're moving to another state, or whatever else it might be. Now, on average, we like to factor in an attrition rate of about 1 member per month, or about 12 members per year that will leave, again, that we have absolutely no control over. So when we're looking at this, we kind of need to make sure that we add that factor in as well. So rather than just 2 new members a month, you really need that extra member as well. So I'm going to look at 3 members per month. All right, I'm going to save that real quick, and of course I can put the mechanisms in. But we know now that we've moved on to new memberships, we can also look at where do members come from? They come from visitors. Now with the visitors, what you need to factor in a little bit is your conversion rate. You can also find this on your traffic lights report. But basically, how many of your visitors are submitting an application and turning into new members? Is it 1 in every 3 visitors? Is it 1 in every 4 visitors? Is it 1 in every 5 visitors? What is that number for your chapter? And really, it's kind of as straightforward as taking that let's say 1 in 5 or 1 in 4. So if 1 in every 4 visitors becomes a member, you actually need to bring in about 12 visitors per month in order to attain your goal of new memberships. All right, so now that we've got the number of members in the chapter, the new memberships and visitors, the next thing we can look at is really all the kind of individual member goals. We have total number of one-to-ones, CEUs, and number of referrals. Now for me, our region does use what's called that power of 1 as a goal region-wide, which means that for each of these, we're looking to do 1 a week as members. We're looking to have 1 referral, 1 CEU, and do 1 one-to-one every single week. So that makes this particular goal kind of easy to figure out. If we're going to have 30 members in the chapter, we're really looking to have 30 members times 1 referral per week per member times 4 weeks on average a month. So now we have 120. Right? We're going to have 2 additional members in that month. So this is now going to go to 128. Then, 136. Oops, I can't type. 136, and then 144, 152, and then 160, right? And the nice thing is, again, because we're using the power of 1, number of referrals, number of CEUs, and number of one-to-ones are all going to be the same, that 120, 128, 136, 144, 152, and 160. right? And again, we have some CEUs to support that. Again, the BNI game is a great mechanism that supports all of this activity. It's amazing how competitive members can get at times. All right, so we're almost done. The last one that we have here is all the way at the bottom of the list, and that is thank you for closed business. For this one, my strategy is to take the closed business that we want to pass in a year. Let's say that we want to be $1 million chapter. If you want to be $1 million chapter, you better be passing pretty close to about $100,000 a month in business. So I'm just going to put in $100,000 per month and make that our goal so that by the end of our year, we will have passed over $1 million. All right, and of course, save that. Whew, we got through it. So we are at the bottom of the hour. Now, as I said, I will stay on this call until every single question is answered, but I did want to make sure I got everything in before everybody had to leave for various reasons. So at this point, I just want to remind you that we do have more webinars coming up next week. We also are recording this, so you can catch the recording and or share this with other leadership team members that may not have been able to make it today. So we do have a couple of questions here. We have so actually, before I get to those questions, I forgot to show you one piece of this from Karen. So how does this work now with all the POMS reports and everything? So once I've saved all these, if I go back now to the operations menu and go to that manage goals, what you'll find is that if you view the chapter goals, it will start to fill in your actual goals as you are submitting POMS reports. So it doesn't make much sense here in Antarctica, but let me show you a real region in the United States. So there's one region in the United States, the Tampa Bay region. Their executive director is one of the ones that helped to conceive the whole POMS program or the goals program. But if I just go to any random chapter here, we can see what their chapter looks like here with the goals program. All right, so here it is. So we can see that for this particular chapter, the movers and shakers chapter, they just have a goal of 100% attendance, which, Susan, that might answer your question from before. This chapter is looking to attain 100%. And I can tell you this entire region, that's their goal, is always 100%. So we can see, though, that in October they had 89%. In November they had 93%. So far in December they have 98%. Total number of one-to-ones, that must be a typo, it's probably 200 or something, but they had an actual of 196. They're looking for 330. They had an actual of 284. So far in December, their goal is 264, and they had an actual of 43. And again, you can see all these different mechanisms that they're using. There is promoting the March conference. There's most wanted highlights and acknowledging members with the most visitors. So all these different ways that they are really utilizing this goals system to keep themselves organized as a leadership team. So Karen, does that answer your question as to how it interacts with the POMS report there? Awesome. So Susan says, I missed where you got the 120, 128. So that one was when I took let's see if this chapter does it that way. So what I did was I took our number of members in the chapter, our goal number of members. So this chapter has a goal of 44 members. And I multiplied that by basically one CEU per week, one CEU per week times 4 weeks. So for me, that was, if we had a goal of 30 members, it was 30 members. That would be 30 CEUs per week times 4 weeks. That would be 120. So that's where I came up with that 120, 128, et cetera number. All right. Does that answer your question there, Susan? Awesome. Karen asks, can we look at other chapter goals to help guide us? Unfortunately, at your level, at a member level, you can only work on your own chapter goals. However, what I would say is if you're looking to look at another chapter's goals, your director consultant can help with that, or your executive director. I do have special permission from this particular region to display chapter goals. So if you'd like a sample, shoot me an email and I can send you a sample of one of these chapters here in the Florida region that is willing to share that information. All right, cool. Jenny says, thank you. This was very helpful and practical. Karen says, what's the email? support@bniconnect.com. support@bniconnect.com. I'm going to type that in for you, support@bniconnect.com. And you can also submit a support ticket. This is actually our preferred way of doing things. If you click on the question mark here in BNI Connect, that will actually take you over here to the support site. Up at the top, there's a thing that says submit a request. That allows you to submit a support ticket. And this is the best way to do it because the entire team gets to answer that ticket. And you'll also see, if I go back to here, you can see all of our live and recorded webinars, our upcoming webinars. A good referral for me is to please share this particular link with your chapter. Let them know about these upcoming webinars. Our next webinar is the chapter web pages next Wednesday. And then we're going to go through a whole member series of webinars as well, how to complete your profile, how to use the online slips and the social media portion, all of that. We're going to be working on that the following week as well, and a couple of them right after Christmas. So, cool. Do we have any additional questions, comments, concerns, compliments, complaints? We like it all. And of course, if you found it helpful, a great thing to do is also we love testimonials. If you could shoot an email to either us or to your executive director saying that you thought that this was helpful so that they can help spread the word to other members in your region, that would be absolutely awesome. If you're not sure who your executive director is, click this regional website button in the upper right-hand corner, go to the contact page, and that will tell you who your executive director is in your region. Awesome. Jonathan says, thank you. This will help. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your business and investing some of that time in the greater good of your chapter. Awesome. Well, if there's no additional questions, I'm going to say thank you guys so very much. I look forward to seeing your names on a future webinar. And in the meantime, have a great rest of the week and happy connecting.